Have you ever noticed how theory heavy courses can leave you just scratching your head about what to do and how to apply those methods in the real world? Whether you're an aspiring entrepreneur who's ready to build your dream business, or you're an avid reader curious about the business world, perhaps you're an authorpreneur. Well, cutting through the clutter and getting to the good bits might be for you. Dr. Dominic McLaughlin is the author of A Better Manager in 5 Minutes a Day and creator of the Business Leaders Lab, the Good Bits Guide for Passionate Professionals. He's here to tell us how. Hi, Dr. Dominic.
Hi, Desiree. Thank you so much for having me.
You bet. Okay, let's get right into it. How did you come up? I love the name, by the way. I love that. The Good Bits. How did you come up with your Good Bits MBA course?
Yeah, well, it's an interesting thing. I'm a bit of a lifelong learner, so I was doing a bit of a course myself and just learning about how to, present things online and look after your learners and all that sort of thing. And some other people who are doing the same thing, they said to me, "Look, would you be able to do a course on business because we're in business? We've got high levels of education and so on, but we haven't ever done like a business course, and like we've already spent a lot of time and money, creating our expertise and doing our own studies. Could you just give us an overview, like the key bits that we need to know, the highlights of what you teach MBA students?" So that's where it came from. Is just trying to, I guess, give people an overview and then also make it highly practical.
This is so important nowadays with everything. It feels like it's moving so fast.
Yeah,
And sometimes people just don't have the time,
yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
I
love it.
think, sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think a lot of, solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, and people running their own business, and this is me too, like we're very short of time. So we want to get things done, like just give me the overview and then I can go more deeply if I need to. And secondly, the other thing is it can be very expensive to do like an MBA at one of the institutions. And so most people who don't care so much about the piece of paper just want to know what are the key things I need to know to apply. So that's kind of the idea.
I love it. You're taking out, it's like the cream rising to the top, that old
Yeah,
saying where you're
exactly.
getting all the good stuff right
Yeah,
there on the top.
exactly. Yeah,
So, can we talk about some of those good bits? Can you give us a couple of tastes?
sure. So the first kind of module that I've sort of called it your roadmap to success, and it's sort of starting there because in essence it's covering what are the key things you need to know about strategy, because a lot of other things, whether it be your marketing or your branding or your operations, all those things kind of to some extent are related to your strategy. So it's like, well, who really am I trying to serve? And I guess one of the good bits I'd suggest is instead of kind of looking at, what's everyone else doing, to really ask the question, who is my ideal customer? Who do I like working with? And to really start with a strategy that says, okay, this is my business. I'm doing this because I want to have a better life or I want to have better, life balance or whatever. So pick the people you'd like to work with and try and attract them. So that's a good way of starting your strategy.
I think that's so relevant. You talked about branding and having the book fast for readers and for writers, and it all ties together. An author needs to be thinking about the audience of their book, and
Yes.
anybody who's a brand needs to think about the audience that they're going to attract to their brand. So that makes perfect sense.
Yes, and a lot of people too are looking for more from authors. So I think that's where this kind of idea of business sort of add-ons or as well as your book is really important. It's like, well, I've really got a group of people now who really like what I'm saying. They like what I'm doing. How can I provide more to them? And so, in the sense of like we talk about a business, it doesn't have to be a highly complicated business. It can just be, well, I want to provide some merchandise or some products, or I want to provide some videos, or all of those other things. Even if we're just starting small, all of those things kind of require us to think about, okay, is my customer the people who read my books, which might be a simple yes, or are there other people that I might attract to my books that I also want to get involved? So there's a lot of different ways of looking at the questions.
Absolutely. Now, if somebody is watching and listening to us right now, maybe they're a little bit hesitant about venturing into the business side of their passion, because that can be
Yeah.
scary, again, especially for
Yeah.
those creatives out there. What
Yes.
key message do you want to tell them?
Yeah, so I think there's a few, like there's a couple of things. The first thing is we all feel a bit like that. So, we're not alone. No one's alone in feeling that a bit apprehensive. So the idea of this course is you can just pick the modules that, you really want to start with. And I've got a free overview that people can have a look at and just get a sense of what's there. The idea would be to just start small, start with something that you understand best, and to do that in a way that's kind of easily ramped up further. So, getting the foundations right, starting with something small, they're key things that can really help us to get some small wins early on and then overcome that kind of like fear of running a business or starting something new that I think we all face.
Hmm. Now, you, Dr. Dominic, are clearly passionate, and that is spilling over into what you're talking about. How does that passion translate into your approach?
Yeah, I think I have always been a little bit unusual in that I sort of have the academic qualifications, but that's not really my first love. My first love is kind of business. So I have those to kind of help me understand the theory to do the business, but also I really enjoy teaching people. So I've taught university students for about 20 years now, just I guess in an evening as well as doing my business, just usually one subject or unit a semester. And what I really like doing is seeing that kind of the aha or the sort of like, oh, that makes sense because I can bring the kind of practical application of what we're talking about. So although in those sort of university settings I'm teaching the theory, I can add in the little case studies or the real life examples that really help people to connect it. And it's much more memorable, much more relevant. And I mean, a lot of students have said to me that, I'm passionate, I'm clear, I'm practical, and I'm well informed. So I guess where I was coming from is there are a bunch of people who don't need to know all the things that you get at a university, like the history of where the theory comes from is not that relevant to most of us. So I just really wanted to share that kind of passion for learning and for making it understandable. I think there's too much kind of like mystique about academia sometimes. It's like actually there's some really useful practical material, and let's engage with that.
It's got to feel so good to know that you've inspired and taught so many and you've helped them on their path. How does that make you feel?
To be honest, that's one of the key rewards, and it's kind of not an immediate reward. It's kind of a later on reward. So I invite students to join me on LinkedIn when they finish their degree, and I try and go along to their graduation if I'm available, and just sort of shake their hand and maintain that contact. And what I really like is seeing those students. I've got a new promotion, I've started a new role. All that sort of thing. To me is really good. I can send them a little congratulations, and it's like, well, some of them say, well, you're a key part of why I was able to do this. And I think it's that sort of unofficial one-to-one feedback that I find really rewarding. It's like not just helping a person to pass a unit or to learn one particular thing, it's to really set them up for the future. And I really like seeing them, get success in the future from whatever it is they're undertaking. So I guess that's where I get the reward.
And it's so nice to know that they've absorbed and they're applying the information. Sometimes it can, when you talk about education and learning and graduating, it is a matter of you passed a bunch of tests, you memorized a bunch of stuff, good for you. But when you actually pull it inside and are able to apply it, and I think that's a big part of what you're doing here with
Yeah,
Goodness.
well, one of my favorite things to teach is actually a final year unit for some undergraduate students. And what we do is we invite in a real world client and say, what are your main problems? And we set the students to solving them over the course of a semester. And I sit with them, each group, and they come up with their own ideas, and I kind of critique it and make some suggestions, and we do some brainstorming. And what happens at the end of that is the client gets all these wonderful ideas, and the students can then put that on their resume and say, well, this is what I've done, and it's so good. It's such a great, that's where I really like operating in that nexus between the theory, the practice, and a great outcome for the people involved.
That's a really smart way to do it.
Yeah.
And you cater to a very diverse audience with your course as well. How do you tailor your content effectively to serve a wide range of people?
Yeah, so I think there's a few different ways. One is just having the capacity to choose the module that suits you. So that's one thing that might be helpful. But I think the other thing is really having more of a bit of a presentation based on the questions people ask. So people can put in some questions and then we'll try and cover those, and then have a Q&A at the end. So that way, if something kind of, if the general information is perhaps not hitting the spot exactly, the Q&A can be a really great way of dealing with it, but also the case studies usually mean that's like, okay, so now I see how I might be able to apply that. So yeah, that's the way I try to do it. I'm always looking for ways to improve. So if people want to send me a question saying, I didn't get it, then that gives me an opportunity to improve further.
For people who are feeling inspired right now, and if they're ready to take some action, what's the first step that they can take to start unlocking their own business brilliance? What do you suggest?
Yeah, so I'd suggest going to drdommcl.com and having a look at the enrolling in the overview, the 8 pillars of business success. That's free. So it's just like, well, have a look and see, are you doing any of those things, or are you interested in learning more about any of those things? And there's a bit of a workbook there to kind of start people on strategy. So it's like that first pillar I was talking about. It's like the roadmap to success. What can I do to start thinking about my strategy and who the customers are that I'd like to work with, and what sort of business I'm really interested in running.
Excellent. And I have a feeling you've got a little goodie inside of the virtual gift bag that's
Yes,
going out at the end of the book fest too. So people can take advantage of that, can't they?
absolutely. Yes. I'm going to provide people with that overview free of charge. So hopefully some people will like to check that out.
I love it. I love it. Dr. Dominic, thank you so much for joining us on the Book Fest adventure.
Thank you, Desiree. It's been great to talk to you.
Absolutely.